Boot, in a time when the West was wild and the rules were but a whisper in the wind. A cast of extraordinary women emerged from the shadows. These were no ordinary women. They were the ones who dared to challenge the status quo, from gun-slinging bandits to cunning con artists. They're the notorious ladies of ill repute, and their stories are as diverse as the untamed landscapes they called home. Here are the 10 most infamous female outlaws of all Wild West. Number 10, Sally Skull. Meet Sarah Jane Newman, a true force of nature from the get-go. Born in 1817 to one of the OG families that staked their claim in Austin territory, she had to grow up fending off attacks left and right to protect her family's land. And get this, legend has it that her mother, Rachel Newman, once gave a Comanche Indian a pretty unconventional pedicure by snipping off his toes as he tried to barge through their front door. At the ripe old age of 16, Newman tied the knot with Jess Robinson. They even had a couple of rugrats together. But guess what? After a decade of hitched life, Robinson decided he'd had enough and filed for a big D. Not one to waste time, Newman was soon saying, "I do again," this time to a guy named George Skull. But here's the kicker. He kicked the bucket in a super mysterious way in 1849. But hey, the plot thickens. Next up, she hitched her wagon to a fellow named John Doyle. And guess what? Yep, you guessed it. He also met his maker in some equally enigmatic circumstances after a whirlwind romance. She wasn't your average damsel in distress. Nope. She was all about bending those gender norms. Picture this. A tough-as-nails, male-dressing, gun-toting, horse-trading maven. She'd made the wild journey to Mexico all by herself, not once, but twice a year. And what did she bring back? Horses that probably had some shady origins, let's just say. But as they say, no proof, no problem. And as if her life wasn't already a spicy telenovela, there are whispers in the wind that she might have sent a couple of her 5 hubbies to the great beyond. So there you have it, folks. Sarah Jane Newman, the bad-to-the-bone, horse-trading, toe-snipping, mystery-wrapped lady of the Wild West. Number 9, Rose Dunn. Back in 1879, Rose Dunn was born in Oklahoma. She grew up at a convent in Wichita, Kansas, where she got some smarts. She had these good looks and a charm that caught everyone's eye. Her big bros went all outlaw mode while she was just a young'un, and they taught her the ropes of shooting and riding. Now here's where things get interesting. Dunn's heart went all aflutter for George Bitter Creek Newman, a fellow from that rowdy Wild Bunch gang run by Bill Doolin. These Wild Bunch folks had a knack for robbing banks and stopping trains in their tracks. But well, their tales all ended up in a mess of... Dunn jumped in on the action, making sure the gang had ammo and supplies whenever they couldn't hit the town themselves. There's this story about how Dunn came to the rescue when U.S. Marshals put a few holes in Newman. She dodged bullets like a pro and held them Marshals back with her own rifle till he got away safe and sound. But wait, there's more drama. Dunn's brothers, who'd swapped their outlaw hats for bounty hunter ones, took down Newman. Word is they were eyeing a sweet $5,000 bounty for each of them. Some folks reckon Dunn spilled the beans about where he was hiding, but both her and her bros stuck to their guns about being innocent in all that mess. Funny thing is, despite all this ruckus, Dunn never got hauled into court for her gang adventures. She eventually kicked back with a local politician and settled down, leaving all that outlaw business behind. Number 8, Pearl Hart. Back in 1871, Pearl Hart was born in Lindsay, Kent. She did the whole school thing in this fancy place, but honestly, she was more into wild adventures than hitting the books. When she was just 17, she got up and ran off to Chicago with this gambler dude named Frederick Hart. But man, it turns out he was a real piece of work, all abusive and nasty. By the time she hit 22, Pearl was done with his nonsense and left him behind. Off she went to Arizona, where she crossed paths with this miner fella named Joe Boot. These two lovebirds had a not-so-typical idea to make some cash, robbing folks. Their scheme? Pearl would charm some unsuspecting guy into her room, and once he was inside, Joe would bonk him on the head and take his stuff. Yeah, kind of risky business, and they almost got caught more times than they'd like to admit. In 1899, Pearl cooked up a new plan, robbing a stagecoach. To blend in, she chopped off her hair, dressed up like a dude. While Joe held up the driver, Pearl snatched over $400 from the passengers. They even left a bit behind so the victims wouldn't starve or be stranded. And off they rode into the sunset, except they ended up lost in the desert. Classic move, right? After wandering around for days, they were so tired they practically passed out. But guess what? When they woke up, bam! The sheriff and his posse were right there. They'd been caught just a stone's throw away from the scene of the crime. Now, during her trial, Pearl dropped this epic line that went, "I'm not going to play by a law that didn't even ask my opinion. But you know what? The judge didn't give a hoot and sent her to trial anyway." And wouldn't you know it, she got convicted. But here's the twist. Pearl became the second woman to rob a stagecoach, and the first one to survive the whole deal. Suddenly she was the big name in Arizona. Journalists came rushing in to talk to her and snap pics of her with her trusty gun. After a year and a half, she got pardoned. The official excuse was that the prison didn't have a spot for women, but folks whispered she might have been preggers, and the judge didn't want to explain that mess. She even had a quick gig in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, but then she decided to lay low and keep it chill for the rest of her days. Number 7. Laura Bullion. Laura Bullion was a real-life badass who went from a crazy life of crime to a surprising career change. Bullion's dad was a bank robber, adding a real twist to her family tree. She ended up joining the notorious Wild Bunch gang after a not-so-ordinary teenage stint as, well, let's just say not your typical job choice. Yep, you guessed it. She was a prostitute. But hold on to your hats because this is just the beginning. With her wild background, Bullion became known as Rose of the Wild Bunch. She wasn't just a pretty face, though. She sold stolen stuff and had connections to keep her gang supplied with horses. And ooh la la, Bullion had quite the love life. She had her share of romantic flings with different gang members. Sometimes she even dressed up as a dude to pull off daring robberies with the gang. Now that's some undercover action. Fast forward to 1901. Bullion got caught with a whopping $8,500 worth of stolen banknotes. That's like major trouble. But after some time in the slammer, she had a change of heart. She left her life of crime behind and surprised everyone by becoming an interior designer in good old Memphis, Tennessee. Time flies, and in 1961, Bullion passed away due to heart disease. But her story doesn't end there. Her gravestone got this cool rose and thorny vines design, and it's even engraved with the nickname the Thorny Rose. And get this, folks, before she died, Bullion was the last surviving member of the Wild Bunch gang. Number 6. Belle Siddons, a.k.a. Madame Vestal. Belle Siddons was a real Southern belle. Born into a wealthy family on a lush Southern plantation, she was all about that Southern charm. Now here's where things get spicy. During the Civil War, Belle put her good looks to work as a Confederate spy. But she got caught and ended up behind bars. But don't worry, after about 4 months, she got a pardon and got out. Then Belle took a different turn. She married a gambler named Newt Hallett, who showed her the ropes of card playing. Turns out, she was a natural. She made quite a name for herself as a dealer in the game of 21. Life threw her a curveball when her husband passed away from yellow fever. Belle wasn't one to back down, though. She packed her bags and headed to South Dakota during the gold rush. There she set up her own spot, a dance hall, a bar, and a gambling joint. And guess what? She went by the cool nickname Madame Vestal. Love came knocking again when she met Archie McLaughlin, a stagecoach robber. Belle couldn't resist using her skills and beauty to help Archie out by gathering info from stagecoach drivers. Smooth, right? But whoopsie, her confidence got a bit out of control one night, and she spilled the beans about an upcoming robbery. That slip-up cost Archie big time. He got caught, had a trial, and yep, he was hung. Sadly, after that, Belle's life took a downward turn. She kind of lost her way and ended up becoming a wandering drinker. Last record? An arrest in San Francisco in 1881. Number 5. Bonnie Parker. Let's rewind to 1910 in Rowena, Texas. That's where Bonnie Parker first made her entrance into the world. She was your regular bright student, dreaming of hitting the big screen as an actress. At 19, Bonnie's path crossed with Clyde Barrett, a 20-year-old who had a record as long as a movie screen. Love hit them like a lightning bolt, and Bonnie jumped on board Clyde's gang wagon, and not in a good way. She swapped the silver screen dreams for a life of crime, becoming a full thief, and brace yourselves, a murderer. For 2 wild years, Bonnie and Clyde went on a rampage that spanned 5 states and took the lives of 13 innocent folks. It was like a movie, but unfortunately, it was all too real. Their crime spree was one for the books, or should I say the history books. But you know what they say about karma, right? Texas Ranger Frank Hammer led an ambush that put an end to Bonnie and Clyde's chaotic run in 1934. It was a seriously intense showdown that sealed their fate. And here's a spine-tingling twist. While Bonnie was doing her brief stint behind bars, she penned a poem that gave us a sneak peek into their future. It goes like this: someday they'll go down together, and they'll bury them side by side. To few, it'll be grief, to the law, a relief, but it's death for Bonnie and Clyde. Number 4, Etta Place. Now we're jumping to Etta Place, the lady who stole Butch Cassidy's heart and joined him and the Sundance Kid on their wild escapade. Born somewhere in Texas, Etta was like the Wild Bunch gang's sweetheart. She rolled up her sleeve and helped Butch and Sundance pull off daring heists, even making a daring escape to Argentina with them. But here's the twist. What happened after Sundance's passing? It's still a head-scratcher. Now check this out. Some folks think Etta might actually be Ann Bassett, one of those badass Bassett sisters famous for rustling cattle. There's a recent photo sleuthing that has given this theory a nod, adding to the intrigue. Oh, and don't forget the silver screen magic. In 1969, the awesome Catherine Ross played Etta in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Hollywood knows how to make history cool, right? Number 3, Big Nose Kate. Now let's move on to Mary Catherine Haroni. You probably know her better as Big Nose Kate. Back in the day, Kate was born into a wealthy Hungarian family, but they moved to the Big Apple in 1860 and settled in Iowa. Life took a twist when her parents passed away, and at just 14 she ended up in foster care. But hold on to your hats, because Kate had a wild journey ahead. At 14, she hightailed it out of there and spun a tale about marrying a dentist she met on a steamboat to St. Louis. Tragically, he fell to yellow fever. After that, Kate tried her hand at a convent, but the nunnery life wasn't for her. She made her way to St. Louis, and well, let's just say she took up a different profession. Yep, she became a prostitute. But the story doesn't stop there. Kate packed her bags and headed to Fort Griffin, Texas. It was there that she bumped into a famous gunfighter dentist named Doc Holliday. Kate introduced Doc to Wyatt Earp, a big-shot gambler and lawman of the Wild West. For years, Kate rode alongside Doc as they traveled around the country. They even tied the knot, becoming partners in crime. And I mean that quite literally. Doc did his dentist thing while Kate, well, she worked as a prostitute. The adventure continued as Doc and Kate made their way to the fancy town of Tombstone in Arizona territory. Kate was right by Doc's side during some of the wildest times, including the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. It's one of those moments that's been told and retold in Wild West lore. Number 2. Eleanor Dumont. A name that might not ring too many bells, but oh boy, her story is quite the ride. Perhaps born in New Orleans to Creole parents around 1829, Dumont's early life is not well known. But what made Eleanor stand out? Well, she had some serious skills with a deck of cards. Yep, she was a card shark during the gold rush era. She hopped around quite a bit, finally landing in Nevada City, California, where she set up her own gambling joint. And let me tell you, she had the looks that could charm the pants off anyone, and manners that made folks feel like royalty. She fell head over heels for a guy named Jack McKnight, who turned out to be a real swindler. He took her money and even sold her ranch. But this gal wasn't one to mess with. She tracked him down and took matters into her own hands. That's right, she shot him dead. Revenge served up, Wild West style. But life has a funny way of twisting things around. As the years went by, Eleanor's looks changed, and she even sported a mustache. Yep, that earned her the name Madame Mustache. As her luck dwindled, she turned to another means to make ends meet, including running a brothel. But here's where things take a somber turn. In 1879, after a rough night of gambling that left her in the hole by $300, which was quite a sum back then, Eleanor was found dead the next morning. They say it was a morphine overdose, possibly a desperate way out. Number 1. Belle Starr. Myra Maybelle Shirley was better known as Belle Starr. Belle was born in 1848 in Missouri to a fancy schmancy family, but here's the twist. She wasn't your typical young lady. Nope, she'd rather be outdoors learning to shoot guns with her big bro rather than sitting in a stuffy all-girls school. Things got really interesting when her family packed up and moved to Texas in 1864. It was there that Belle crossed paths with the notorious James Younger gang, led by none other than Jesse James. These guys were like the rock stars of the outlaw world, robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches all over the place. And guess what? Belle knew them from her younger days in Missouri. Fast forward to 1866. Belle got hitched to a horse thief named Jim Reed, but Jim took a dark turn and ended up killing a guy who supposedly offed his brother. The duo bolted to California, but Jim's luck ran out in 1874 when he got shot down. Widowed but not beaten, Belle married Samuel Starr, a Cherokee man, joining the Starr clan and embracing the outlaw life with open arms. She became a real mastermind, the brains behind the gang's operations. Belle had her run-ins with the law, but she was like a slippery eel. Sheriffs could never pin enough evidence on her to keep her locked up. Seems she was just as good at evading trouble as she was at stealing horses and bootlegging. Sam Starr's time came in 1886, leaving Belle to mix things up with a bunch of intriguing men. Eventually, she married Jim July Starr, a younger relative of her late hubby, to hold on to her land in Indian Territory. But hold on to your hats, because in 1889, Belle's story took a tragic turn. While riding home in Oklahoma, she got hit by a shotgun blast. To this day, the identity of her murderer remains a mystery. And there you have it, folks, a wild ride through the untamed days of the Wild West, where women weren't just bystanders, but fierce, daring outlaws who defied expectations and etched their names into history. From sharpshooters to schemers, these ladies showed that in a world dominated by men, they could hold their own and even outshine the most notorious gunslingers. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.